In the summer of 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the height of his power. Emperor of the French, master of continental Europe, and commander of the largest army ever assembled on the continent. But one decision would bring it all to the brink of collapse: the invasion of Russia. Today, we're going to uncover how Napoleon justified this catastrophic decision, in his own words. From his letters, proclamations, and private reflections, we'll explore the mind of a military genius as he marched headfirst into disaster. In 1707, after defeating Russia at the Battle of Friedland, Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I signed the Treaty of Tilsit. For a time, the two great empires maintained a fragile alliance, but tensions soon began to rise. Russia refused to fully enforce Napoleon's continental system. His economic blockade aimed at strangling British trade. To Napoleon, this was more than a diplomatic disagreement, it was betrayal. Archival document June 1812 proclamation by Napoleon. Russia is drawn by fate. Her destiny will be fulfilled. She has insulted the honor of France and broken her vows. I come not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The Russian people will welcome us once they are free from their tyrants. Bold words, but beneath the defiance was an emperor deeply worried about his grip on Europe slipping. He believed that a swift, crushing victory over Russia would restore French prestige and cement his empire for generations. Grande Armée crossing the Neman River. On June 24, 1812, Napoleon's Grande Armée, more than 600,000 men from across Europe, crossed the Neman River into Russian territory. It was a force unlike anything Europe had ever seen, but it was also a logistical nightmare. Napoleon expected a short campaign. He believed that after one or two major battles, Tsar Alexander would beg for peace. He had done it before. Why not again? But this time, the Russians didn't play by the script. Scorched earth tactics, Russian troops retreating, Russian generals, especially Mikhail Barclay de Tolly, adopted a strategy of controlled retreat. They denied battle, destroyed crops, burned villages, and left nothing for the advancing French army to feed on. Napoleon was stunned. "They retreat before us, but not like cowards," he wrote to his Minister of War. "It is like chasing shadows in a land of smoke." Smolensk, first major confrontation. In August, the French reached Smolensk. It was one of the first major cities to resist the French advance. There, Napoleon finally engaged Russian forces, but only their rear guard. The Russians torched the city and withdrew once again. Napoleon took Smolensk, but wrote bitterly, "Victory means little if the enemy never stands still long enough to be broken." Borodino, a brutal clash. Then came Borodino, September 7th, 1812. The bloodiest single day of battle in the Napoleonic Wars. Over 70,000 casualties in a single day. It was not a decisive victory, but Napoleon claimed it as won. In a letter to Empress Marie-Louise, he wrote, "It was the most terrible of all my battles. The Russians fought with the bravery of lions, but we took the field. Moscow is within reach." Napoleon enters Moscow. On September 14th, Napoleon reached Moscow, but instead of surrender, he found silence. The city was nearly abandoned. Days later, fires broke out. Many believed they were set by Russian patriots to deny the French even a symbolic prize. Napoleon took refuge in the Kremlin and waited for peace, for Alexander, for a sign. But no sign came. Letter to Count Molay. "I expected envoys. I expected offers. There is only fire and wind. I feel I have taken a city of ghosts." Still, Napoleon lingered. He believed the Tsar must bend eventually. Weeks passed. Winter approached. Supplies ran low. Morale collapsed. The retreat begins. October 19th. Finally, on October 19th, Napoleon gave the order, retreat. But the army was already crippled. Horses starved. Soldiers froze. Russian troops harassed them at every turn. In a chilling letter to one of his marshals, he wrote, "The cold is killing us. Men die standing, frozen where they halt. We march through a white tomb." Crossing the Berezina River. In late November, what remained of the Grande Armée attempted to cross the Berezina River. The crossing was chaotic. Bridges collapsed. Thousands drowned or were cut down by pursuing Russians. Only fragments of the army made it out. Napoleon leaves his army, December 5th. On December 5th, Napoleon left his army and raced back to Paris. He feared a coup in his absence. He traveled incognito, wrapped in furs, traveling with just a few men. He wrote to his advisors ahead of his arrival, "The army has suffered, but it remains loyal. I return to restore order and prepare a new force. France must not despair." Aftermath and legacy. By the time the last survivors staggered out of Russia, less than 100,000 men remained. Of the original 600,000, most were dead, captured, or missing. And yet, Napoleon refused to take the blame. "I did not lose in Russia. It was the snow that defeated me, the cold, and the refusal of the Russians to accept peace like civilized men." He blamed the Russian winter, the burning of Moscow, the length of supply lines, everything but his own ambition. But history sees it differently. The invasion of Russia shattered the myth of Napoleonic invincibility. It emboldened his enemies. It marked the beginning of the end. Napoleon's exile and death. Just 3 years later, Napoleon would be defeated, exiled, and dethroned. His Russian campaign would go down in history as one of the greatest military blunders of all time. But in his mind, and in his writings, he remained a man of destiny, a man betrayed by nature, not a tyrant, but a misunderstood titan. If you enjoyed this journey into Napoleon's mind, don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more hidden moments from history. Until next time, stay curious.